Kajai, Shrimati Lasadevi Kajai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi Kajai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Budale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Dejatarni. So before beginning class, I just want to mention that, actually several things. Today is the last day of the month of Kartik, very auspicious day. And it's also the appearance of Nimbarkachari and also the celebration of the Rasa dance of Krishna, the full moon. Now the interesting thing is the Rasa dance is tonight and there's an eclipse. I don't know what's going to happen with the deity worship tomorrow morning because the eclipse is at the same time as Mangalarti. I don't know what system you follow here, but we'll talk about that later. It's actually the longest eclipse in 800 years.
580 years.
What?
580 years.
Okay, you're more accurate. 580 years. It's the longest eclipse in like 580 years. And it goes, what time? You're probably more accurate than me. It goes for about
11 to 6, around 11 something till 6 something.
11 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's not including the penumbral aspect. So it's even longer than that.
I didn't see
Yeah.
that exactly.
Yeah, there's a penumbra.
Does that affect here?
Yeah, you'll have to talk about, I mean, some
It's shown in the ordinance.
in South India, they actually stop the deity worship during the time of the eclipse. I don't know what they do in Mayapur.
In Vrindavan, the residents inside the temple, they do it with the outside temple deities closed.
Yeah.
But inside they don't stop the deity worship.
They don't stop the deity worship.
But they close
The temple.
The temple, so nobody else.
Are there any direct instructions from Prabhupada?
No. There's no direct instruction from Prabhupada. And it's hard to figure out what... Anyway, that's up to I'm going to leave it. I'll consult with the deity worship minister today.
Yeah, that's
And see what he says, because that's our authority. And anyway, it's confusing. So today also, I wanted to talk about Nimbarkachari before I began Bhagavatam class. Nimbarkachari is actually one of the main acharyas in the four sampradayas, the Kumara Sampradaya. A very, very important person. And Nimbarkacharya's followers are very prominent in Vrindavan. You may not be aware of this, but they have a different way of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra than we do. Does anyone know about that? No. They chant Radha Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Radha, Radha. Radhe Sham, Sham Sham, Radhe Radhe. Anyway, so it's a different way of chanting Hare Krishna. We don't criticize them. They're very prominent in Vrindavan, especially in Barshana and Western Braj, like that. You'll find many, many followers of Nimbarkacharya. And he's a bona fide acharya. It's not, and he also came in touch with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this in his Navadvip Mahatmya about Nimbarkacharya. So here's a little history. He appeared between the 11th and 12th century AD. And he appeared in the Dravidian provinces of South India in a Brahmin family, Tailanga Brahmin family. And in the beginning, he was a worshipper of Lord Shiva. And actually, even before the story that I'm going to tell about him worshiping Lord Shiva, there's a reason why he's called Nimbarkacharya. That one time, he invited this is the history at least, he invited a Jain to take prasadam. And it was dark, and the Jain said, I'm not going to take prasadam when it's dark, when the sun is set. So Nimbarka, he actually arranged for, in a nimba tree, the sun to shine forth from the tree. So Nimbarka, that's why it's called Nimbarka, Nimbarkachari. So he had the sun shining forth from the nimba tree. That's why it's called Nimbarkachari. So the Jain happily took prasadam with him. Later on, he was in the forest worshipping Lord Shiva with a group of other brahmanas, and he approached Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva appeared to him and said, "Go to this nearby forest, and in this nearby forest you will find the 4 Kumaras, the sons of Lord Brahma, Chatushra." So he went to the nearby forest, and there were the 4 Kumaras, and they were meditating, and they opened their eyes, and they saw this Nimbarkacharya, and they took him under their wing. In other words, they initiated him in this Radha Krishna mantra. Radha Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Radhe Radhe, Radha Radha. So they initiated him in that mantra. And so he started performing sadhana, chanting that mantra. And according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that one of the places he performed sadhana in was Navadvip. So he went to Navadvip to perform sadhana. And when he was in Navadvip, he all of a sudden saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I mean, first of all, he saw Radha and Krishna. He was meditating on Radha Krishna. And then Radha Krishna manifested themselves as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was, of course, overwhelmed with ecstasy. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him, gave him instructions. He said, "In the future, you will take birth in Kashmir." You know Kashmir in India? "And then you will be a great Pandit. And you will go all over India defeating people with your philosophy. And then ultimately you'll come to Navadvip, and I will defeat you." So that's Keshava Kashmiri. I think you all know that story.
Yes.
From Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. And so he predicted that he would actually become this Keshava Kashmiri who would be defeated by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and was a follower of the goddess Saraswati, and he surrendered to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is Nimbarkacharya. So he's very much connected, his sampradaya is very much connected to ours. Dvaita Advaita, Advaita Advaita. In other words, his philosophy taught basically very similar to Achincha Bheda Bheda Tattva, which is Dvaita, duality, and Advaita, oneness, which is similar, practically the same thing. Achincha Bheda Bheda Tattva. That means inconceivably one and different simultaneously. So Dvaita, Advaita is basically the same thing. And of course you have the other philosophy, the other acharyas. And our philosophy of Achincha Bheda Bheda Tattva is very close to Nimbarkacharya's philosophy, and very close to the Sri Sampradaya Ramanujacharya's philosophy, Vishishtadvaita, but it's not that close, incidentally, which is really interesting, to Madhvacharya's teaching, which is Dvaita. Because Madhvacharya postulated a extreme difference between the Lord and the living entity, and between the Lord and his energies. And Lord Chaitanya showed how the Lord and his energies, the Lord and the living entities are actually one and different simultaneously. You know, as we know, the energies become transformed. That is Shakti Pramana, Parinama, Shakti Parinama. Not that the Brahman doesn't become transformed, but the Shakti becomes transformed. And anyway, that's our philosophy. So now we'll go on to Srimad-Bhagavatam. So it's a very important day. Nimbarkachari is a very important person in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, as well as the pastimes of an acharya. So reading from chapter 7, chapter summary. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, chapter summary. This is a very interesting story. In this chapter, the descendants of King Mandata are described, and in this connection, the histories of Purukutsa and Harishchandra are also given. The most prominent son of Mandata was Ambarisha. His son was Yavanashva, and Yavanashva's son was Harita. These three personalities were the best in the dynasty of Mandata. Mandata. Purukutsa, another son of Mandata, married the sister of the snakes, Sarpagana, named Narmada. The son of Purukutsa was Trisha Dashu, whose son was Anuranya. Anuranya's son was Haryashva. Haryashva's son was Praruna. Praruna's son was Trivandana, and Trivandana's son was Satyavrata, also known as Trishanku. Famous story. When Trishanku kidnapped the daughter of a Brahmin, his father cursed him for the sinful act, and Trishanku became a Chandala, worse than a Shudra. Later, by the influence of Vishwamitra, he was brought to the heavenly planets, but by the influence of the demigods, he fell back downwards. He was stopped in his fall, however, by the influence of Vishwamitra. The son of Trishanku was Harishchandra. Harishchandra once performed a Rajasya Yajna, but Vishwamitra cuttingly took all of Harishchandra's possessions as a dakshina contribution and chastised Harishchandra in various ways. Famous story. Because of this, a quarrel arose between Vishwamitra and Vashishta. Harishchandra had no sons, but on the advice of Narada, he worshipped Varuna, and in this way he got a son named Rohita. Harishchandra promised that Rohita would be used to perform a Varuna Yajna. Varuna reminded Harishchandra repeatedly about this Yajna, but the king, because of affection for his son, gave various arguments to avoid sacrificing him. Thus time passed, and gradually the son grew up. To safeguard his life, the boy then took a bow and arrows in hand and went to the forest. Meanwhile, at home, Harishchandra suffered from dropsy because of an attack from Varuna. When Rohita received the news that his father was suffering, he wanted to return to the capital, but King Indra prevented him from doing so. Following the instructions of Indra, Rohita lived in the forest for 6 years and then returned home. Rohita purchased Shunakshepa, the second son of Ajigartha, and gave him to his father, Harishchandra, as the sacrificial animal. Oh my God. In this way, the sacrifice was performed, Varuna and the other demigods were pacified, and Harishchandra was freed from disease. In this sacrifice, Vishwamitra was the Hota priest, Jamadagni was the Advarya, Vashishta was the Brahma, and Ayashva was the Udgata. King Indra, being very satisfied by the sacrifice, gave Harishchandra a golden chariot, and Vishwamitra gave him transcendental knowledge. Thus, Shukadev Goswami describes how Harishchandra achieved perfection. And so read. Okay, we'll do the first verse. So, Shri Shukovacha Mandatuhu Putra Prabharo Yo Ambarishaha Prakirtitaha Pitamahena Pravrito Ayovanashvas Tu Tatsutaha Haritas Tasha Putro Abun Mandatri Pravara Ime Shishugovacha Mandatu Putra Pravaro Yom Varisha Prakirtitaha Pitamahena Pravito
Pitamahena pravito
Yovanashvash Tutatsutaha
Yavanasya Shutastuta
Haritastasya Putro Bhun. What? Okay. Mandatrir Pravarahime.
Mandatri Gururi Girme.
Okay. Who wants to chat? No one. Okay.
Shri Sukuvacha,
Sri Sugavacha
Manhatu Putra Pravaro,
Mandatu Putra Pravaro
Yom Barisha, Kirtituta,
Yombarisha Prakititaha
Pita Mahina, Pravito,
Hena Pravito
Yava Jaspas Tuta,
Yovanashvash Tutatsutaha
Haritastasya Putro,
Haritastasya Putro Bhun
Mandatri Pravara Ime,
Mandatri Prabharaime. Okay. Sri Sugavacha
Vishwavacha
Sri Sukadeva Goswami said,
Vishwavacha said
Mandatahu
Mandatahu
of Mandhata
Mandata
Putra Pravaraha,
Prabharaha
the prominent son,
Prabhavacha
Yaha, the one who,
Vanu
Ambarishaha, by the name Ambarisha,
Ambarisha
Prakirtitaha,
Prititaha
celebrated,
Celebrate
Pitamahena,
Tamahena
by his grandfather Yuvanashva,
by his grandfather Yuvanesha
Pravritaha,
Prabhavacha
accepted,
accepted
Yuvanashvaha,
Yuvanasha
and named Yuvanashva,
the name Yuvanasha
two,
True
and
and
Tatsutaha,
Tapshutaha
the son of Ambarisha,
the son of Ambarisha
Haritaha,
Pritaha
by the name Harita,
by the name Harita
Tasha,
Tasha
Yuvanashva,
Yuvanesha
Putra,
Putra
the son, Abut,
Prabhu
became,
became
Mandatri,
Mandatri
in the dynasty of Mandhata,
in the dynasty of Mandata
Pravaraha,
Prabharaha
most prominent,
most prominent
he made all of them.
all of them
Translation, Shukadeva Goswami said the most prominent among the sons of Mandata was he who is celebrated as Ambarish. Ambarisha was accepted as son by his grandfather Yuvanashva. Ambarisha's son was Yuvanashva. Yovanashva. And Yovanashva's son was Harita. In Mandata's dynasty, Ambarisha, Harita, and Yovanashva were very prominent. So I'm just going to read the next text. Oh, just explanations here. Narmana Batrir Bir Data Purukutsaya Yoragai Tayarasatalam Nito Bhujagendra Prayuktaya. The serpent brothers of Narmada gave Narmada to Purukutsa. Being sent by Vasuki, she took Purukutsa to the lower region of the universe. Before describing the descendants of purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, before describing the descendants of Purukutsa, the son of Mandata, Shukadeva Goswami first describes how Purukutsa was married to Narmada, who was induced to take him to the lower region of the universe. The lower region of the universe is not necessarily hellish. There's places where the snakes with their hoods, they light up things. It's like Bilvaswarga. Bilvaswarga, it doesn't refer to hell. It refers to the lower heavenly planets, where it's very dark, called Bilvaswarga. And the light is from the jewels on the snakes' heads. It's really nice. I don't know, I've never been there. So next verse. Gandharvan avatit tatra vajyan by Vishnu Shakti Drik Nagalabdashvara Sarpad Abhayam Smaratam Idam. There in Rasatala, the low region of the universe, Purakutsa, being empowered by Lord Vishnu, was able to kill all the Gandharvas who deserved to be killed. Purakutsa received the benediction from the serpents that anyone who remembers this history of his being brought by Narmada to the low region of the universe will be assured of safety from the attack of snakes. So remember that. Of course, we have a better method of being free of the fear of snakes. Does anyone know the method? No one knows the other method? Worship Govardhan.
Oh, yes.
So anybody who worships Govardhan will not be, and anyone who doesn't worship Govardhan will be attacked by snakes. So that's our method. But we can remember this too. Here in America, you got a few venomous snakes, but in other countries like Australia, there's many more snakes. Actually, it's the worst country in the world for poisonous animals. When I was in Australia, I saw like giant boa constrictors right next to the temple. They could eat children. They're right next to the temple. And they have these spiders there that if they bite you, they actually kill you. You know, little tiny spiders. And I looked at my arm one time. I had all these spiders on my arm. And I got really nervous and I blew them off. Yeah, so actually very dangerous. Very dangerous. They are the most dangerous creatures in the world, except for human beings, which are the most dangerous. Anyway, Trasadashu Porukutso Yo Naranyasha Deha Krit Haryashvastat Sutas Tasmat Praunota Tribandanaha. The son of Purukutsa was Trishadashu, who was the father of Anuranya. Anuranya's son was Haryashva, the father of Praruna. Praruna was the father of Tribandana. All right. Actually, I'll just finish here. Just tell a story about Anuranya. This, of course, is Anuranya is the forefather in the dynasty in which Lord Rama appeared. Hope everyone knows that. And Lord Rama appeared, of course, in the Sun dynasty, the Surya Vamsa. So the reason I'm talking about Anuranya is because he's actually a very important person in the Ramayana, the Valmiki Ramayana, is that Anuranya was actually fighting with Ravana. And he was trying to defeat Ravana, and he got killed by Ravana, but when he was on his deathbed, he cursed Ravana that Ravana would die being killed by one of Anuranya's descendants. And of course that descendant was Lord Ram. So his name is actually also mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana, like that. So anyway, we'll maybe end class here. They're just historical verses here. So any questions or comments about anything? Questions, comments? Yeah.
Sometimes when it refers to descendants of the snakes, does that necessarily mean they had forms of snakes, or sometimes human-like forms?
They're human-like forms. It's described in the Mahabharata that the snakes can actually transform themselves. Like there's that whole story of Astika, who saved the snake race. I think many of you may know that story. All right, I'll tell it. Janamajaya, the son of Parikshit Maharaj, hated snakes. So he was doing this, I'm remembering all the names now. So he was doing the Sarpo Yagya to kill all the snakes. So the snakes understood that this yagya was going to take place. So going back a little bit before that. So Vasuki, he wanted to have a cross between a snake and a Brahmin, so that the Brahmin could stop the sacrifice in the same way that Vamanadev stopped the sacrifice, that Bali Maharaj was doing. So what happened is that there was this sage in the forest who was determined. This is a Mahabharata story. The sage Jarakaru, he was determined to be a brahmachari and never get married. So he was very, very happy. He was walking in the forest, chanting his rounds, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Really, confirmed. So really enjoying himself. But then he comes upon a whole bunch of people who are hanging over a hole. Okay, let's see the deities. Jai. Jai. Radha Radha Kanta, Shishi Gauranatai, Jagannath Baladev, Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai. Okay. So here's the story. That these bunch of people are hanging over a hole, and there's a rope, and there's a rat that's eating the rope, and they're going to fall into the hole. And he asked them, who are you, and why are you going to fall into the hole? And they said, we are personalities whose descendant never performed pinda. And therefore, pinda means when you do the pinda, you save your ancestors from hell. Therefore, you're called putra or putri. So he's hanging out there, and he's saying, oh my God, so who is your descendant who's not doing that? Because in order to do it properly, perform pinda, you need to have children too. So they said, our descendant's name is Jarat Karu. And he says, uh-oh, that's me. And they said, this Jarat Karu is refusing to get married. So therefore, he doesn't perform pinda. And he's not going to have a son who's going to perform pinda. So he's a rascal. And Jarat Kaur said, oh, that's me. And he said, all right, I'll get married, but only one condition. If you can find a wife that has the same name as me. So he's thinking, this is never going to happen. I mean, how many ladies are called Jarat Karu? So he goes through the forest, chanting, I got it made, I don't have to get married. And then finally he says, well, this is the last opportunity, I'm getting a little old. So he cries out, is there any lady here by the name Jarat Karu? If not, speak now or forever hold your peace. And Vasuki brings forth his sister, who is a naga, a snake lady, but she has a human form. So that's answering your question right there. So Vasuki brings forth his sister who has a human form and says, here's your wife. And he says, oh no, I got tricked. And he says, all right, I'll get married to her, but only on the condition that she never talks back to me. And so, therefore, they say, okay. And so, what happens is they get married, and she's really nice to him and everything like that. One time he doesn't wake up in time to do his sanja. You know what the sanja is anyway. So she thinks, I really want my husband to wake up. She's very devoted to him. And she says, Jarat Karu, time to get up. And he gets up and he's angry as hell. And he says, you aggravated me. I'm leaving. And then she says, but you're supposed to give me a son. And he says, Asika, there will be. And she gives birth later on to the son Ashtika. And Ashtika is like a Brahmin, combination of Brahmin and Naga. And Ashtika goes to the sacrifice of Janmajaya. Janmajaya is doing the snake sacrifice. All the snakes are falling into the sacrifice and dying. And Takshaka is the one he really wants to kill. Because Takshaka is the one that killed Parikshit Maharaj, his father. So Takshaka is being protected by Indra. Part of the story is there in the Bhagavatam too. And so finally, he chants the mantra, or has the Brahmins chant the mantra, let Takshaka fall into the fire along with his protector Indra. Same time, Ashtaka arrives at the sacrifice, and he says, of course, Janmajaya says, what do you want, my dear Brahmin? He says, stop the sacrifice. So Janmajaya has to listen to him because he's a Brahmin. That's the culture. And so he stops the sacrifice, and Takshaka is saved. Along with Indra too, because Indra was getting ready to fall into the sacrifice, into the fire, along with Takshaka. So I hope that answers your question. They can change form. Like also we see, there's other instances of that, like Kunti was a descendant of the Nagas too. That's why when Bhimsen, he got the poison, he was thrown into the river, and he went down, the Nagas bit him, and there's Rasa Kunda, which is like something that made him as strong as 10,000 elephants. So Kunti was a descendant of the Nagas. And there's other stories too, of course, Arjuna married a Naga too, Ulupi. And she obviously didn't look like a snake when they got married. So they were like shape-shifting personalities. They're very powerful. They could look like snakes, Takshaka could look like a human being too. There's stories about that when he ran into his father, Kashyapa. Kashyapa was the father of the snakes. And they were the cousin brothers of Garuda. So, they're powerful. They're not just like some snakes we have in America. Yeah.
And like something similar with the Nagapatnis?
No, the Nagapatnis were like mermaid type of people.
They were what?
Mermaids.
The
Mermaids. They were a little different species. They were half fish and human, half, upper half were human beings, and they had little. Prabhupada described they had fish.
Anantashesh sometimes appears in human life form.
Yeah, yes. Anantashesh appeared. Well, of course, it's Balaram. Anantashesh, yeah, Anantashesh. But the Nagapatnis, Prabhupada described the Nagapatnis as being like fish bottoms and lady tops. And when one of the temples, actually, I'm in charge of is the Kaliya Krishna temple in Fiji. And Prabhupada had the deities made for that temple. My godbrother Bhardaraj, our godbrother Bhardaraj made the deities, original deities. And there's actually Nagapatnis there. Snakes. Not snakes, sorry. But they're like, anyway, whatever. But they're like mermaids. Like that, so.
Someone calculated that's where Kali actually went?
Prabhupada said that.
He said, okay.
Prabhupada said that. Nobody calculated, but Prabhupada actually said when he went to Fiji that Kali went there after, and actually in Fiji there's all sorts of legends that the natives have, not the Indians, but the natives, the Polynesian, Melanesian people. They have pictures that look just like Kaliya. When the devotees first went there and they showed the people a picture from the Bhagavatam of Kaliya, they said, that's our God. So there's somehow or other they're aware, and they even talk about a particular place in Fiji where Kaliya lives. And there's a mountain and there's a cave in the mountain that goes. the cave in the mountain that goes to the sea. And I know where the place is, although you can't really climb up there. The natives won't let you climb up that mountain. And one time, Indradunya Maharaj went and he tried to climb the mountain. And he was stopped, I think, by the weather or by some natural force, stopped him from climbing the mountain because he wanted to see Kaliya. So there's a whole story. But Prabhupada actually made that point. That's why Prabhupada installed the deities of Kaliya Krishna there. It's an interesting story. I mean, what's that? I mean, everybody likes to have their phone go off all the time. See my phone here? I put it on silent all the time. Because if I want to find out if someone called me, I check later, not during class. Okay, on that happy note, I think we should end. And happy Kartik. Today's the last day of Kartik. We have some sort of program tonight in the temple, right?
Yeah.
So what time does the program start?
Evening.
Evening means what, like 10 o'clock?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, IST?
Class, Arti,
I
and
think that we talked about it yesterday. Your class is going to be around 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock is the class.
So 6 to whatever time, then we'll have a little ceremony, fire sacrifice.
All right.
That will end. So that
Okay.
might be another
Yeah,
hour
I,
after that.
because of the danger of so many people in the temple, I'm just going to give the class. I'm not going to come to the temple besides that. I'm very cautious about my health, and the health of all of you, because I can't risk being down for 2 weeks. Okay,